Hey everybody, this is Giancarlo Alino reporting for Sportskeeda MMA, and I'm happy to welcome in my guest today. He is the English voice of Rizin. He is Showdown Joe Ferraro. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing today?
Doing great. And Joe, I had to have you on here to talk about all the exciting stuff going on in Rizin because Floyd Money Mayweather has been doing a lot of business with Rizin. His recent exhibition bout there took care of it handily. Didn't look like he broke too much of a sweat. The TKO win. And this wasn't his first exhibition boxing bout over there. Like, this has been a while that Rizin has hosted, even one of his other fights. Just what were your initial thoughts when you heard about him coming over to Rizin for these events and that you'd be on the call for it?
Well, the first time when he fought Tenshin Nasukawa, that was a shocker. I didn't see that coming. The Japanese folks, they're very reserved. They keep a lot of stuff to themselves. They'll kind of give us sort of updates, but the Mayweather one, they kept it as a surprise. That was the first one. The Tenshin one was a surprise. The Asakura one, this most recent one, we kind of got a hint of it. Then they finally told us, make sure that we're available. So obviously I was available. You're not going to say no to calling a Mayweather fight. At the same time, life is life. I'm going to move things around to call a Mayweather fight. So that's two feathers in my cap, calling two Mayweather fights. How they pull it off, I have no idea, because Floyd Mayweather doesn't come cheap. But they're wonderful negotiators. Rizin has so much connection in Japan. They're the biggest organization there. Clearly, there are a lot of corporate sponsors out there, and they're able to provide value, at least in return on investment, if they jump in and sponsor an event like that. So you get Floyd Mayweather out there. You got to put up the big money, pay the big money, but it's always worth it, right? So the fact that you're contacting me, the fact that these big outlets in the States are asking questions because you bring in Mayweather, it's going to put eyeballs on your product, right? So, and the Rizin product is fantastic. I mean, it's completely different than the UFC. Clearly, if you look behind me, you can see all the UFC events that I've covered. I should probably start putting all my Rizin ones up there eventually. But different type of show, different type of format, and it's just magical out there. So good on Rizin, and I was happy to be the international voice for the broadcast. So.
And what's it like when Mayweather is involved with the event? Like, is there a different feel to the atmosphere? Because the Japanese fan base, like a lot of the times, it's quiet. They'll clap. Like, it's different than North America, what you're accustomed to. Like, so what's the difference there when Mayweather's fighting?
It's no different than when a big star is competing. Even back in the day when you had your Krokops and your Nogueiras and even the Bob Saps, when you get like mega stars coming out there to compete in the ring, there's a different vibe, right? When you have the fighters on the roster competing in a Grand Prix, right, those get bigger and bigger and bigger. But every so often, when you get that big superstar, it's a different vibe. There's an excitement, there's electricity, you can feel it. Tension as you get closer and closer to the fight. So overall, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful part to be to experience that. The Tenshin Nasukawa one, we were there live. Since the pandemic, we haven't been able to go over to Japan. So we've been doing it, like, for example, from here, from my home studio. So I don't know what this one was like, but based on the questions I asked and the conversations we had, it was the same. It was just, Mayweather's in town. Here we go. Can Asakura pull this off, right? So.
And Rizin's product, it's been a few years now that they've really established themselves and their new branding, but does it still have that pride feel to it when you're calling a Rizin event?
100%. 100%. It's very similar. Especially when it's taking place in the Saitama Super Arena, the Tokyo Dome, whether we're in Osaka or wherever we might be, you just get that sense that because it's the same, original promoter from back in the day, right? So it's the same vibe, it's the same feel. Everything is sort of, it's a spectacle, it's a show, right? It's not just, fighters are just making their way to the cage back and forth. No, they're coming to the ring, they're coming down a ramp. From the very beginning, they introduce the fighters to the crowd. It's a show. It's an actual experience. I can tell you this, when it comes to the quality of the video footage that you see on the big screen live, as well as the sound, it's unbelievable. Like it's insane in comparison to the UFC. In the UFC, where no matter where they went, it was high quality, very, very high quality. But the Rizin events, there's just something a little bit different. From the crystal clear sound to the incredible theatrics, obviously the big boom at the beginning of the show, and that is loud. Let me tell you, I talk about it all the time in the broadcast. You'd never expect if you've never experienced it, you have to do it. Just that alone is like the pulsating in your chest. So they're doing a great job. I think there's going to come a time when they're going to start getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That time is coming. The difference is obviously with the North American fighters. If you look at the way fighters are promoted in the States or North America versus what's happening overseas in Japan, it's the bigger fighters here in North America, the smaller fighters over there, right? And that's just natural body types, right? For the most part. Heavyweights are happening in Japan now. Light heavyweights we've seen go over to the UFC. So it's getting bigger. It's getting better. I'm excited. I'm very excited. I've always been happy to be a part of it.
And just speaking of light heavyweights that have gone on to the UFC, Jiri Prochazka, UFC light heavyweight champion. He's been on a tear going back even to his time in Rizin. And I don't even think he's had a fight go to the distance in years. Like every fight has been TKO, KO in the past like 6-7 years. So you were involved there when he was just coming into Rizin and he was still pretty young, early 20s. Was there a lot of hype around him at the time, or did he just emerge as this big talent out of Japan?
I would say B. There was a bit of hype around him. He's your modern day samurai. Like he believes in that Bushido spirit. We knew that, even all the interviews and all the times we were able just to hang out, you're dealing with somebody a little bit different, right? Not off kilter, not wacko, just he operates on a special frequency, just a little bit different than everyone else. Always had time for you, always had a smile, but always intense. From weigh-ins to competing, always intense. You knew when to crack a joke with him, you knew just to let him be, right? So watching him fight and calling some of his fights, you can never count him out. You can never count him out. You just don't know what he's going to do, what he's going to be able to pull off. He's in such amazing shape that if it's, a 10-minute first round, a 5-minute second round, or 5-5-5, whatever it might be, you can never count him out. He's never going to quit. He's always going to find a way to pull off the victory or get knocked out or go to sleep. Like he's never going to quit, right? So it's super exciting to watch him compete, and super proud of him becoming the champ over in the UFC. And like I said, wonderful human being. Very, very proud of him for sure.
And he's a fighter that it's not like they gave him an easy fight going into the UFC. Coming off Rizin, he's a Rizin light heavyweight champion. Goes to the UFC, beats Volk in his first fight, beats Dominic Reyes, who a lot of people thought beat John Jones in his next fight, and then Glover Teixeira looked like he was going to get finished there, comes back and pulls off a submission. Like, what were your thoughts when you saw like Jiri Prochazka, now this guy from Rizin, is the UFC light heavyweight champion? It's
no different than when I had, when I was with George St. Pierre back in the day, right? As soon as they get to that big show, that UFC, right? You're worried. It's like, are you that good? Are you really that good? And then they win their first fight and you're like, okay, but are you really, really that good? Let's see your second fight. And they pull it off. And then they both became champions. And then you have to look back at yourself and you realize they are that good. They are that talented. They're fighters and they find a way to win. Now, obviously with Jiri going from Rizin to the UFC, it wasn't that big of a jump when GSP went from UCC TKO over to the UFC. That's a big jump at the time, right? Rizin is not that big of a jump, but the quality of competition was pretty big when you think about it. And I mean, am I surprised he's got that title around his waist? Originally, yeah, right? I mean, that Glover fight was one thing, another. And he's just able to pull it off. And part of me was like, yeah, that's Prochazka, right? He's going to do it. He finds a way to win. So, it's interesting to just see him continue to develop. Clearly, he's in his peak right now. When you're the world champ like that, he's just he always puts a smile on my face, right? He's always just ready to go, and as crazy as he can be at weigh-ins and at the night of the fight, it's Jiri, man. He's a great dude.
And that fight was incredible. A lot of people even saying fight of the year when we're looking back at 2022, and Dana White has not shied away from saying maybe this is going to be a rematch now with Teixeira and Prochazka. Do you see Prochazka getting that knowledge that he has on Teixeira, getting his experience of almost being finished and coming back and maybe having an easier time? Or do you think Teixeira, we can see the veteran have one more in him and take the title off Prochazka?
It's an interesting rematch because, Teixeira's been around, that rugged, he's your blue collar worker. I mean, back when I was covering the UFC and spent my time with Glover, he went on record. I don't even know if Sportsnet aired it, but we have clips of him and I just talking about my backyard And him saying, "Backyard, what are you doing?" I said, "I got to build a fence. I got to put a, I'm gonna probably do this." She's like, "I'm coming. You got tools? You have tools?" Like, he's that blue collar guy. He's that handyman, right? Always willing to have a good time, always having, laugh, and he trains hard, exceptional submission skills. So he's going to figure out a way to try and beat Jiri. Jiri now knows that he's in for it. It's going to be, 25 minutes of war. There's no breaks. Anything can happen at any time. But the fact that he can believe in himself, that I can pull off that win at any time, especially late in the fight, he can do it. So it's going to be a mindset. And the one thing, and I've said it in so many interviews before, it's never the best fighter that wins. It's the best fighter that night, right? You just don't know what these fighters. That's why when people ask me to make predictions, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen that night. I've been around the game for over 20 years, and I know that the best fighter is not always going to win. George has always talked about this. It's the best fighter that night. You don't know what happened the night before. You don't know what kind of like small, silly things like breakfast. What did he have for breakfast that's now messing with his stomach, right? Is he now dehydrated? If he's dehydrated, I've seen guys compete, massive favorites in fights, lose fights. And the only intel that I was able to like figure out was that's the 6th time he's gone to the bathroom since he got to the arena. This dude's dehydrated. He's not going to compete more than 10 minutes. In the second round, something's going to happen. And I would say these things to some of my Sportsnet producers and cameramen, and lo and behold, second round, the guy gets knocked out. He should never have been finished, never been knocked out. But there's a fighter going in there physically, in excellent shape, but today he's dehydrated. He's not doing well. I've known fighters, Giancarlo, that primed, ready to rock and roll, and then they had their significant other or a significant other, causing fights and keeping them up till 2, 3 in the morning, and just this and that, and financial problems, blah, blah. And they head into the fight. They're exhausted. They're tired. They're mentally not there. I got to win this fight or we can't pay the bills. And that happens, right? It's a little small. Guys that showed up injured, right? Get past the doctor's physical, right? And I'm like, that knee is going to buckle. Guys that have been knocked out in training, 2 weeks before a fight, you're fighting a much tougher guy or girl. I don't like your chances right now. Although you're the heavy favorite, this is going to get really interesting. So any fight, Giancarlo, you just never know until they get in there, right? Anything can happen.
Yeah, and it's also good to have somebody in their corner, and it's perfect transition there because Vadim Nemkov, another former Rizin fighter, goes on the Bellator. He has Fedor Emelianenko in his corner all the time, a legend in MMA, and it worked wonders. He ends up beating Ryan Bader, finishes him. He has 2 wins over Phil Davis. Like when people look at Vadim Nemkov and Jiri Prochazka's time in Rizin, are they maybe looking over the fact that light heavyweight division should be talked about more as one of the best in MMA?
I think the answer is in your question, right? 100%. 100%. Like they're people are like, who's competing at Rizin? Who's this guy? Who's that guy? Well, lo and behold, one's a UFC champ, one's in Bellator. It's people don't realize the quality of talent that Rizin has. And it's not even the light heavyweights, man. It's not even close to the light heavyweights. If you look at the bantamweights and the featherweights, the flyweights, these are killers. Very high level mixed martial artists, to the point where Damien and I, it's hard calling some of these fights. I feel like sometimes when I miss something specific that just happened, by the time Damien's done speaking, 3 other things have happened. I'm not going to bother mentioning it. I just can't. I just got to keep going with the flow, right? So the level of competition in Rizin is massive. It's absolutely massive. It's huge. It's very, very acute, and you see it when they go international. Most of the fighters, when they leave Rizin to go compete in the UFC and Bellator or elsewhere, they continue to shine. They really, really do. And forget about Horiguchi getting KO'd there. He's been around. Let's not kid ourselves. But he's still a star, still fast, incredible footwork, crazy stance. How he pulls it off, I don't know, the karate stuff, but yeah, he's magical. He's unbelievable.
And also, Rizin does something that I really like, that the cross promotion they do with Bellator. I've noticed a lot of it. We've even seen Musayev come in, knock out Sidney Outlaw, 27 seconds. He has a win over Patricky Pitbull, Friere, and that's another fight that could happen in Bellator in the future. They've had Horiguchi go back and forth, won the title in both organizations. So is this something that more MMA promotions should be doing, like the UFC, or is it just something that if it's the right situation, we'll only see that with Rizin and Bellator?
It's depending on which side of the fence you're on, right? From a sporting perspective, I don't think there should be, in any way that prevents fighters the best competing against the best, right? That's what we want to see. We want the best to be the best or compete against the best. So cross promotion is wonderful, but from a promoter's perspective, when you look at each, especially you, and I know Dana White's going to say the money that they've spent in promoting these athletes, it's a risk for them now to go elsewhere to a supposed smaller organization, compete against a fighter no one's ever heard of, really, unless you're a hardcore fight fan, and potentially lose. So depending on which side of the fence you're on, you can make the argument both ways. I'm okay with fighters competing, the best competing against the best. But from a business perspective, I definitely understand what Dana White's thinking in the UFC and whatnot, and these other promotions. Like, I'm not going to risk my best guy or my champion competing against their champion, the supposed best, and I'll figure out a way to bring him over. Look at the Ben Askren situation, right? They waited and waited and waited and waited. They brought him over, and he almost got knocked out by Robbie Lawler, and then eventually we saw what happened with Ben Askren's career, right? So Dana's, but also he didn't get him in his prime, right? So there's a time and place. Even when they were trying to bring Fedor over, which was never going to happen, no matter what. It was one of those things: timing. All right. So if you ask me, I'd love to see the best fight against the best, but promoters got to protect their products, right? It's their money, not ours.
Yeah, that's true. And like, I think it would be nice to see, like, I'm one of those fans too that would love to see the UFC champ and even one champ go at it, or UFC and Bellator. But do you think maybe Dana White's a little sour to the idea because of what happened with Chuck Liddell when he went to Pride back in the day and lost to Rampage?
Could be one of those things, right? I think it always goes down to more business than personal. Like when Lorenzo was there, it was always business. He was the business mind behind everything. Dana's smart. Dana knows what he's doing, but Dana's obviously, when you're in public record and your cameras are on you all the time, you can see the emotional side. So it was very risky for him. The Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather fight, that was a win-win. The risk was in Mayweather's corner, not in Conor's corner, not in the UFC's corner. From the UFC's perspective, that's a win-win situation. Conor McGregor talked himself into a Floyd Mayweather fight, and that does wonders for the UFC brand, right? Mayweather is, totally going to win that fight. That the payday was just massive for him, so he knows what he's doing. So Mayweather doesn't make these mistakes. He knows what he's doing. So it's always a business when you look at it from the outsider looking in. It's not just the fights; it's a business. So that's a good business, situation for the UFC when Conor went over there. Anything else is totally different. It's totally different because it's too much of a risk, like a UFC champion taking on a Rizin champ or a ONE champ or a Bellator champ. Way too risky, because if that champion loses, the UFC champion loses, it potentially could devalue the UFC. And I can, if I'm the guy putting up the money, or my company's putting up the money to promote this fighter, only to have him lose against another promoter, their fighter, man, that doesn't look good at all. And fighting's a risky business, man. Inside the octagon and ring and outside of it. So you got to be careful.
I agree there. A couple final questions here with Showdown Joe Ferraro. Joe, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, big loss in the MMA community, not just even in Canada MMA, but just MMA as a whole. Elias Theodoru last month passed away at a young age. What were your interactions with him in the past? And do you have a story you can share on just the kind of person he was?
Where do you want me to begin? I'll keep it PG. How's that? Because Elias was that guy there. He was hilarious. So obviously winning the Ultimate Fighter, Tough Nations, we had a long-standing relationship. When he was at Sportsnet, and he'd come over and we did some stuff outside of Sportsnet. We hung out. He was the one thing I loved about Elias. Well, there's many things. Didn't matter who you were, didn't matter where I was. He was going to make time to make sure that I was okay. And I'm like, dude, you're the fighter. Like, we're going to make you okay. The simple example, we'll go back to the Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather promotional tour. When they came to Toronto, there was some interesting, not beef, but just almost arrogance from UFC Canada, because I was no longer with Sportsnet, didn't go over to TSN. And I just continued to prove a lot of their sayings wrong, and they didn't like that. I did it publicly. When we got to that venue, I forgot what it was called in Toronto. Should have it over here somewhere. The O'Keefe Center. No, it wasn't the O'Keefe Center. Anyways, it was one of the concert venues. Get there, and I'm sitting there in the media seats, and I'm looking around. People are saying hi, and one by one, the media is being pulled away, and I'm sitting there alone. And I was just like, "Where is everyone? What just happened here?" And Elias comes running with his girlfriend. "Hey, what's going on?" That's the picture that you see on my Instagram with me, Elias, and his girl. He just came to hang out because he knew what was going on. They basically took everybody but me to go interview Conor and Floyd, right? And of course, I have my ways, and I connected with both of those guys after. And he was just that guy. He knew when somebody was in a bad situation, he was going to be there for you always. Some of the funnier stuff was after the Tough Show had aired. We all went out for drinks to celebrate. Obviously, now it's official. You're the Tough Nations champ, blah, blah, blah. And we just, we had a wonderful time. I can tell you that guy had one-liners that were so funny, they wouldn't hit you right away. He'd say something and he'd be like, yeah. He'd kind of walk and you're like, "Oh my God, you said what?" And he was just that guy. He was just an ever-loving guy, so smart, so intelligent, always smiling ear to ear, always had time for you, hard worker. One of the things he always told me as well was we would watch fights together, and he would prick out right away. He's like, "There's a difference between a fighter and somebody who wants to be a fighter." Right? And I used to laugh at him. I'm like, "Dude, you're a pretty boy with your beautiful hair." He used to call himself a video vixen. I think it was in an Ariana Grande video. He's like, "Hey, Joe, you like me? I mean, I'm a video vixen now." I said, "Elias, you're a mess with your long hair." Right? And he would be like, and then we'd watch fights and he's like, "That's not a fighter." Or he'd say, "That's a fighter." Right? And he's like, a lot of people want to be fighters. They want to get to the UFC, but they're not fighters. And some are. In essence, you can just tell by a guy or girl what they do when they're in big trouble, how they react and what they do. So he had a good eye for that. And again, those one-liners, Giancarlo, is just the guy he was so hilarious. And obviously, not many of us knew what was going on. And then when we got the news, I remember my phone blowing up that evening. I didn't believe it, right? Because I hadn't heard from him in a couple of weeks, maybe a little bit more. Life goes on, right? And then to get that news, I'm like, no. And then I started digging a little deeper, and I'm like, wow. He's legitimately gone. He died. Wow, what's going on here? So yeah, it's a terrible loss for the MMA world. Terrible loss for humanity. All the stuff he's done to legalize MMA legalize as part of being an athlete competing with cannabis. So wonderful dude, wonderful guy.
Yeah, echo those sentiments. I only met him one time, and you can just tell, like, I didn't know him, and he just treated everybody like they were friends from high school, just always greeting you, calling you homie and all that stuff. So
yeah,
that was just a great person he was. And again, condolences to his family and friends, and condolences to you because you guys were close. So before we wrap up here, I want to just give our audience at Sportskeeda just a greater understanding of what you do, because you're a hard worker, Joe. Not only are you calling events there in Rizin, you're a mortgage broker and York United FC PA announcer. So just tell our audience just what your day-to-day is like, and do you ever get any sleep?
I do get sleep. And I'll tell you why. As you get older, you start realizing the importance of sleep. So I try and get my 8 hours in for sure. I'm a full-time mortgage broker. So if anyone in the GTA wants honest, sincere mortgage advice for in Ontario, feel free to reach out to me at any time. Be more than happy to help you out. That's really my full-time gig. I'm also obviously the play-by-play voice for Rizin. But again, those happen every 6 weeks or so, right? So full-time, I do this. I'm also the in-stadium voice for York United FC. Incredible CPL soccer, really good stuff. We've seen so many good players make it overseas now. Diadine Abzi just signed Mobabuli, so we're doing pretty good there. The other real passion, and I mean, it's difficult telling you because I can see the poster behind you. You can see the shirt that I'm wearing. I'm a soccer coach. Like, that is my absolute highest of high passions. Like, I live for it. It is incredible therapy. I coach my son's rep team. They're U13 now, so they're 12-year-old boys. It is beyond therapy to be able to be. I've been with these guys since they were 5 years old, and seeing them develop I watch more soccer coaching videos, soccer games, read about elite athlete psychology in their teens and youngsters than anything else that I do other than mortgages and fights. But that's all I do. I mean, I think my Netflix account went dormant. I think my Amazon Prime account went dormant. I don't watch anything. I do watch some stuff, but my everything is just coaching videos, coaching. You put me on the field, I can put my phone down, don't have to talk to anybody other than just focus on these boys, developing these boys into wonderful soccer players. And yeah, like actually I should say that the only thing I do, well, I guess Fubo and DAZN are what I watch, right? Like I've got my subscriptions and I watch, you know, my Juventus, I watch Italy, I watch Manchester City, I watch all, you know, Barcelona, PSG, I watch all these games from a coaching perspective and from a fan perspective. So yeah, soccer is my life, and it consumed me now, Giancarlo. Like absolutely consumes me. So
That's great. And before we wrap up here and let you go, Joe, how can our viewers here follow you on social media?
Instagram, I'm basically pretty much everywhere now. Instagram is Joe Ferraro. Facebook, just look for Joe Ferraro. You'll see me with the Pitbull look, the sunglasses and bald head. People think I'm Pitbull. Yeah, so if you ever see me, ladies and gentlemen, you call me Pitbull, you're probably number 3,714. So yeah, I get it all the time. So it's actually funny. So Instagram, Joey Ferraro. I'm on Twitter, rarely on Twitter. I don't like the platform that much. Obviously on LinkedIn from a business perspective, again, Joe Ferraro. Started a TikTok account. Really got to figure that out. It's more mortgage related than anything, but I might open it up and have some more fun with it. But yeah, I'm all over social media. And if you need to, like you need mortgage advice, by all means, I've got a mortgage email, but I got a personal email that we can start there. It's simple. Joe at joeferraro.ca. Anything related to that nature, please feel free to reach out if I can help you out. And make sure you guys support Giancarlo, because this guy's the man. He's wonderful. He's a great human being. And he wasted his day talking to me. Like, come on, man, that says a lot. He took his time out of his busy day to talk to this bald guy. So yeah, get her done.
Highly recommend that follow. Thanks, Joe, so much. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your time here, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on, and best of luck to you as well.